All right, I'm here with Bryonie of the Fernie Brae. Hi, Bryonie. Bryony is a dear friend of mine. I've gone to visit the Brae a couple of years in when was it? In September? Yeah, in September both years, and we just hit it off perfectly. So, yay!
That's true.
Today, Bryony is going to be talking about her son and about some tips for magical parenting. Um, that's a subject about which I really can't speak at all, unless you're talking about parenting cats, in which case, oh, I can, talk about that
Yeah.
all day.
Oh yeah.
But cats are already magical, so, they don't need a nudge in any direction.
No.
Okay, Bryony, let's start with a introduction here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Yeah. I was very lucky with the where I was born. I grew up in Southern California, and I actually grew up on a kind of a perch in a hill. I guess I wouldn't say the mountains of Malibu,
Oh,
with the ocean and near an area that could not be developed. So we had during strong successful seasons, I suppose, when things were healthy, that we'd get bobcats sometimes coming through, always coyotes and deer, and so there was wildlife up there. I grew up with a lot of animals, um, and I grew up with space to explore and be in the trees all the time. So that was incredibly lucky. And I just spent a lot of time alone. Hiding keys was a very favorite thing to do.
that's awesome.
Anything I could lock, and I would hide keys in like the knocker trees. And yes. And then I will say this: I had a long period of time where I knew I was my name is after a fairy. I mean, it's a plant, but my mom got it from Mary Cecily Barker. Cecily Mary Barker. I always do that.
I always mix it up too.
And I love them now, but they were very girly, and I was not girly. And I didn't like, it's funny, I liked pink, but I didn't like pink.
Mm-hmm.
And I had said at some point, I don't feel it now, but that I hated fairies. And meanwhile, I was going, I know! I just didn't like, what I didn't know is I didn't like how they were being portrayed.
Right.
I hated the way people were portraying them, only keeping them in this little sparkly, super girly box, which I also adore now. But meanwhile, I was outside decorating little, like we had, I don't even know if they were palm trees, but they were like palm fronds, but they were really fat and stubby. Anyway, I would turn those into brooms when they dried. They had these things. And so I made those into brooms with sparkles on them. And then weird, like I didn't have normal sticks that I'd use. I'd use these random sticks that were really straight. They were these weird plants, and I would turn those into wands. So, and hiding keys. I was clearly.
So it was a magical childhood, despite the fact that you weren't understanding the full extent of fairy necessarily at the time. Yeah.
And I want to keep the energy up, but I want to be honest, like emotionally, it was not a very wonderfully safe environment with the men in my life. And so it was like a lot of people I feel experience. It was a really wonderful way to escape, but it was safe, and and my mom also very much supported it. Yeah.
So how did you end up in Portland?
I ended up going to college in Michigan, which is where I ended up meeting Eric and finding him. And then
discovered him.
We ended up both moving to Chicago. It was kind of like, it was near Michigan. We're like, that sounds fun. I think Chicago's a lovely place to visit. It's where I adopted my first kitty. I worked as an assistant vet at a cat shelter, a no-kill cat shelter. And after like not even quite a year, I was just, I couldn't stand it. And I said to Eric, I gotta go. I'm thinking mossy trees in Portland. That was really, I was like, there's mossy trees and I need to go there. And so we did a road trip together and we checked out Seattle. We hung out there for like 3 hours and we were like, "Meh." And then we came down to Portland and actually ended up like in the neighborhood, looking around the neighborhood that the Fernie Brae now is. And loved it.
Yeah.
Ended up moving here.
You know, that's how I felt the first time I went to Portland too. So I understand completely. When did you realize magic was real and that you wanted to be a part of spreading it among mankind? Just a small little question, not a big deal.
Not a big question. Yeah. I think this was the question I forgot to ponder more. It's big. There's like, I suppose I don't have a particular moment. I know that, so I definitely was supported in like I remember my mom giving me a book when I was really young. I guess not that young. I was a little older, book called Celtic Magic. And I started reading that. And, and I was raised to take care of animals. And I always felt I communicated with animals. Mm-hmm. That was always true. And and then there was a book called, this was before like discovering Brian Froud. I read a book called Boy's Life. Again, I really always kind of felt a lot more tomboyish, mm-hmm. And related to a lot of boy stories a lot. And it was called Boy's Life, and it was interesting. Like if you read the back cover, it would not tell you anything about it, but it really took this year of this boy's life in this tiny town, Zephyr, Alabama, during the 60s. So there's like a whole lot of cultural racism, turmoil, all going on. And, but it walks this fine line between myth and reality of a child's life. And there's a quote, I'll probably butcher it a little bit, but there's a quote in the introduction that says, "We're all born with magic. We're born able to read the stars and see our destinies in the grains of sand. We're born with whirlwinds, comets, and stories inside of us like that." Wow. And then the magic is educated out of our soul. It's washed out, combed out, churched out, spanked out. That's what it says. And then it talks about us having glimpses of that magic as we grow up. And I was 15. I was 14, 15 when I read that book. And I was like, I will not let the educated out of my soul. No. And I was just like, So I think I always felt it was real, but that was when I was like, I will do everything I can to make sure I don't lose this. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't that long after that I found Brian Froud. Mm-hmm. And that like solidified. Yeah. Oh, fairies. I don't hate fairies. This is my life. And then, am I talking too much?
No, you're fine. You're great. This is
too much for the story. At the senior year of college, I think I was in a few classes and I was in art school and I'd been to Italy, very fortunate. I'd gotten to study there. In Italy also, I like really, I wasn't connecting with people at first, and I was having a conversation with a group of people I didn't know well, and people were like, "Well, where else have you traveled?" And I was like, "Well, I went to Costa Rica last year, and that's where I saw my first fairy." And it was one of those moments where I was just like, I just want to weed out all the people. And the person who ended up becoming my longest friend, we now both live in Portland. He was across the table and he turned to me and he went, "What?" And we just started, and that was like, we bonded and now we live in the same city, and our children were born 3 months apart, and that's magical.
Aww.
And then senior year in art school, I was just like started to like make things with fairies, and I was like, I know this isn't art material. And it happened to be that two of my teachers, my ceramic teacher and my photography teacher, were so supportive. So, and they were like, do more, do more, do more. Yeah. So I got really led.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Meant to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of slides us into the Fernie Brae.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that started?
Yeah. Yeah, that was similar around that same time, 21, 22. I think I was feeling so supported. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like this is something that the world really needs. And people, and again, with the book, like people need to remember wonder. They need to remember magic. How can I have a place that supports that? And I remember talking to my mom about it. And she said, great, let's draw it. And when I drew it, the space in my mind at that time was going to be some kind of little like coffee shop with some art on the wall. I was like, ooh, maybe I could carry Brian's books and prints. And it had a tree in the middle, like a sculpted tree in the middle, and nooks and crannies for kids, and for there would be like reading groups or something. Yeah, so then fast forward, gosh, what was it? 11 years from that? No, yeah, something like that. I had come back to this dream. I'd gotten to know the Frouds like amazingly and become really close friends. And I'd been sculpting fairies. And so I got to know Wendy through that, and then Brian and Toby. And then I was like, I shared with them this vision. So they knew, and it kind of kept, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen. And so everything fell into place where Oliver was just starting preschool. He was just over 2. And I thought, I'll start looking. I just started like looking again at buildings and places. And then Toby approached me and said that Brian was leaving the gallery that they were at, and that all his artwork was going to be shipped to Toby, and that it was all mine if I wanted to exhibit it. Yeah. And I was selling my childhood home where I grew up with all this magic. Then I was heartbroken, and I thought, okay, how, like, if there's any way to turn that heartbrokenness and that, like, having to say goodbye to that, I can take that and create this space. And it turned into this just like bigger thing than I ever imagined. So we invested in this building. Mm-hmm. The Fernie Brae became just this awesome fairy temple, whose intention is to be a safe place for people to rediscover magic, or to deepen their relationship with magic and find wonder again. And the way I knew to do it this first time was with gifts. People could come in, they could feel the space, they could be in the space, and they could leave with a bit of magic with gifts, mm-hmm. With buying little treasures. And with Brian's art, and getting to be with Brian's art is just a gift. And that's transitioning now as the world is transitioning and shifting. And the heart of the magic of the space is still what it is, but figuring out how to bring that magic to people without it having to be through gifts, mm-hmm. and buying things is my next vision.
And it's so exciting. I'm so excited for it.
Thank you.
Oh, it's nerve-wracking, but it's also exciting at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's clear, magic has clearly led you this far, you know, mm-hmm. and it will absolutely continue to lead you and the space to what it's
always crunchy. Yeah. And it doesn't mean it's been smooth. There were so many crunchy road bumps along the way that I'm not talking about.
But eventually, I mean, you know, no path is exactly like this. They're, you know, they're all a little bit like.
Well, they were all challenges that I had to, and I think I've learned, and I don't think this is going to be the way always, but I'm really grateful that I'm listening to this transition before it gets really crunchy.
Yeah.
It was feeling crunchy. It was just starting to feel a little bit like something needs to change. I don't know what. And then COVID gave, unfortunately, but it gave the space to be like, to step back and actually feel the energy of what needed to happen and what needed to shift.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned at the beginning of this interview that we were going to talk about magical parenting. So let's start talking about your family. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yeah. Like just my little nuclear family.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you're
Yeah.
married, you have one kid.
Yeah. Eric and I have been together since college. It's been nuts. We rode through the 20s together. And an interesting thing with that is I had to learn how to not be so secretive with my magic. My whole relationship with magic, like with my hiding keys and fairy, it's very like I love being secretive. Mm-hmm. And so I found this amazing magical community that is also family here, and like studied and like went through witch school and had amazing mentorship. And for the first few years, couple years, I really kept it separate from my relationship with my husband. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn how to like shift that part of my relationship with magic, that there's still the personal, there's the secret, there's the part that like going into the woods, all the things that you want to do and you do solo. Sure. But that I was really like shutting off growing with my husband by shutting off like that part of my life. So that was huge, eye opener. And also like that I wasn't trusting him to be in that part of my life and to hold that sacred. I didn't ponder this at all. This is all coming out, right? I'm like, oh yeah. So thankfully, I realized that before having a child. And our relationship just deepened so much more. And that's been incredible. And he is a beautiful woodworker and is the reason for all the woodwork and like so much of the incredibleness in the Fernie Brae, where the runes I burned, like he did all the woodwork in here. And he is a huge part of building, like knowing that was my dream and supporting it and literally like helping ground it, yeah. Which he does a lot in our relationship. And then I have a kiddo. His name is Oliver, and he is magical 7, about to turn 8. And he's a spitfire. And I will say he has a Virgo sun, a Sagittarius rising, and a Cancer moon. And it's all the things. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. Okay, so let's start. When you found out you were pregnant, did you do anything special during the pregnancy to bring magic into the life of your child, to bless and protect the pregnancy or anything like that?
Yes. I had a wonderful, awesome, fun, normal baby shower where I got like needed gifts and like lots of fun and that my mother-in-law threw for me. And then here at home, I had a magical blessing with five of us. And everyone brought, Mama Brain loses some details, but I think everyone brought a bead or a couple different things, and then we had a thread. And throughout the gathering, each person threaded a bead on and put their blessings in it. And everyone gave me incredible blessings and held space. And I also had room in that moment to grieve. Grieve that what I felt was when we're born into a body and we really come from fairy, that can be a lot of what we experience, is really wanting to go home and remember fairy again. Mm-hmm. And there's so much of the human experience that keeps us from that. Mm-hmm. And so I had like this revelation. I was feeling like I was taking him out of fairy. And I still feel emotional about it. And making sure he had that magic and that relationship with fairy that he was coming from in his life. So it was
skills, Bryony.
well, it's having an amazing supportive system. I do that. I go back. I'm like one of those empathic, you go back to that. So I'm remembering that space and having that moment and being like, you have a fairy family and we're sharing this together and this experience. And I'm going to make sure that you remember that, however is right for you to remember that in this world. Yeah.
Wow, deep breath. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Sorry, still thinking about what you said. Let's see.
It's intense being a human.
What's that?
It's really intense being a human.
It
It's
is.
a really big gift, and it can be really hard.
It is. And having that dichotomy or that contrast of, like you said, remembering where you came from.
Yeah.
And never quite feeling right in either space, possibly. Yeah. Do you have any special memories of moments where your son seemed to have an awareness of magic or to see beyond the world we know?
Yes. I want to, he is actually he has a very earthly body. He's actually like, it's really good. He is very of this earth, and also like fiery. So there have been a lot of times he's, the way he interacts with animals and the way he is with me and sees things. But recently, like, it's been more like he can describe things better. So I wanted to come up, I wanted to remember some earlier times, but those are all just like this, they're kind of this vague pool of like these moments and like and like all the things like children and their wonder that they innately have.
Absolutely.
But yeah, recently at bedtime, he was talking about, and I know I shared this with you, we were just talking about the day first. I don't even know why it came up, but he said, well, you're a fairy and a witch. You're a fairy witch, and Dad is a goblin troll. Goblin and he's like, and he said, so I'm a fairy goblin troll witch. And he said, and I can see your wings. And I said, you can? Well, tell me what color they are. And he goes, well, you can see them. And I said, well, yeah, but I'd love to see what you see. I'd love to hear what you see. We all see things a little differently. And he said, well, they're turquoise and golden shimmery on the edges. And he said, and they glow when you're really happy or when you're making things and you're creating things.
Oh.
Which really touched my heart because that's really what I'm trying to get back into more of. And then he said, and your heart glows and your fingertips glow too. He's like, and when we're really silly together, I think he said too. And then I asked him what his looked like, and he said, well, you tell me what mine look like. So I did, and he said, yes, that's what they look like. That was a very, very specific, clear case. Yeah. And I've taught him a lot just simply over the years, like holding stones and paying attention to what he notices. But I won't jump ahead. It's interesting with his, like, I'll let you ask your next question.
It's almost like you know what questions I'm asking ahead of time or something. All right. What sort of things do you do to help foster this love of wonder and imagination in him?
And foster is a really good word because it's there.
Yeah.
Kids have it. They just need it fostered. So we had this little thing. I started making I made this book when he was like 3. I made a tiny, tiny, tiny fairy book that I surprisingly haven't filled yet. But there is a chimney in our kitchen,
Mhm.
and there's a like a crack, a little hole, and I made a book that fits. It sticks out, but it fits and it wedges into that hole. And so, like around 3ish or something, I had that show up, and I mean, oh my god, I can't believe I can write this tiny, but in very tiny writing. There are stories from the fairies that live. There are the fairies that live within our house, and they live in the chimney. But I said they live like that's like their gateway through. Um, and so, yeah, he gets messages from the fairies, particularly like birthdays, graduating from kindergarten, big things that happen around Christmas, and or sometimes just randomly. And he's written notes back.
Now, how
So
does
that
he know to check, or does he check there on a regular basis to see if there are any
he
new notes?
doesn't. He does not. He kind of. It's funny. If I'm doing it continuously, he will.
Mhm.
Um, but it gets spaced out. I forget, and also like it feels like it shouldn't be too much. So it's just like suddenly it pops up, and it's just right in the kitchen. So like he
Mhm.
like I don't know playing, he'll just like see it because it sticks out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then you know talking about stones and crystals, talking about animals, really encouraging empathy and like all of his imagination. And so I think another thing is I've always said not to, I've always encouraged like the beings that he talks about being around. And he lives with dragons. I think there's 18 now.
Wow.
They have a lot of babies. Um,
That's a
so
very
I,
warm, cozy home, I guess, huh?
yes, well, they all live in his room. They can expand,
Okay.
contract. But it's asking more details and asking him to draw them,
Mhm.
and asking what their names are, and just being like ever curious to hear more and more and more about anything he talks about in that sense, and any of his stories. I think just fosters that. And I remember he had a kid at school, he was talking about his dragons, and maybe there were one or two that said, well, they're not real. And he came home and he said, how sad that they don't think it's real.
Wow.
He's like, that's really sad because they're real, and maybe they don't see them and they don't see my wings, but that doesn't mean they're not there. And I talk about that all the time, that we're
Oh,
not all like lucky enough to remember it. And yeah.
he's such a special kid.
Every kid is special. They just need to. Yeah,
Yeah.
another thing, I will say another thing. I make sure he has a lot of time to be bored. I
Mm.
like. I don't. He. I say like we don't allow bored in the house. Like you don't get to be bored. But I mean, obviously movies stuff, they're fun. TV we do, but not a lot. And so there's times when it's really crunchy, and he can be really like especially there's a period of time, I don't know, there's like just those times when it's really resist, and he's, he's like, I just want to sit and watch TV. I've got nothing to do. There's nothing to do. And I'm like, well, figure something out.
Mhm.
And like we have to deal with the crunchiness, and before long he's outside coming up with some like crazy story and building something.
Yeah.
And it's like I just, that's another thing. I really like don't go to figuring out how to entertain him.
Mhm.
I want him to figure that out. And we do stuff together, of course, and that's fun. But like, yeah,
That's
that
wonderful.
fosters imagination and wonder. Yeah,
There's so many opportunities for kids to not be bored these days that it's wonderful that you're giving him that to
yeah.
to have that, fostering his imagination.
I mean, and again, I'm lucky. We have a backyard. He has an amazing dad who built him a tree house. Like he has awesome places to explore outside. I
Mhm.
had so much space to explore outside. I'm like, oh, I wish he had more of that, but I'm like, there's so much that he has,
Mm-hmm.
so much, and that other kids don't have. So it's harder in an apartment, you know, but it's there. It's there.
Well, speaking of the adventures that he's had, that was my next question. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the wonderful adventures you've gone on as a family? What was it like for your son to visit magical sites in England, Chagford, the Frouds, meeting them?
I just always say he has no idea. He doesn't. He's had the experience of, so the artist Danielle Barlow
Mhm.
also lives where he's good friends with the Frouds. The last time we were there when Oliver was 5, almost 6, he got to horseback ride to the Frouds house. Oh, that actually, no, that was when he was almost 4.
Okay.
Last time Danielle Barlow took him through the countryside and the hills on horseback.
Oh, wow.
He got to get behind the scenes of the making of the Dark Crystal and see the Crystal Cave as it was being made. And he has no idea, but he remembers them. He remembers these things. And we've gotten to explore in the countryside, just like the wild horses out in Chagford, and getting up into trees, and like he creates these stories of we were just exploring through the trees together, and he got up in a tree and he's like, this is where I was as a baby tiger, and he tells me about this whole like lifetime of he told me this whole story. But yeah, and then Hawaii, we've gotten to be like, that's another part that I'm really excited that the ocean calls to him the same way. It's a huge part of my life, and he's gotten to go 3 times.
Wow.
No, wait, twice? Maybe I've been 3 times. And we go during when the humpbacks are coming through and having their babies.
I was just going to ask if he was there when you saw the whales.
So
Yeah.
the first time he was ever on a boat, we were out. I guess he was 4, and we were out. We decided to go on a boat. I think it was one of the whale watching boats, and a whale came over, went under our boat 3 times, came over and spouted. And the video my husband took, it spouted right where the sun hit it so that it created a rainbow.
Wow.
And then the whale came up to the front of the bow and did what they call, I think it's called a sky hop. Am I making that up? But they come up and they put their nose up. Mm-hmm. And I just looked at him. I was like, this doesn't happen. Really like you. Like, people have been on boats many, many times in their life, and this doesn't happen. Yeah. This is incredible. I kind of think he's just like, I've always tried to foster gratitude and like, that just never expect things. Yeah. And then this last time he came out paddle boarding on one, we took him out paddle boarding, and he got to be near the whales, like flopping around.
Wow.
I know. And manta rays. He got to see manta rays on his first time snorkeling just off the beach.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. He's he brings a lot of luck. Yeah. Yeah. When I was pregnant with him, that was the first time I went to Hawaii, to Maui, and a sea turtle rubbed up against my belly, like swam under me. Wow. And he loves turtles.
Oh.
He loves turtles. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Does he still talk about seeing the whales?
Yes. I think he is I think he sees the whales as like, I think I talk about different animals that we connect with at different times in our life, and he really connected with the sea turtles. Mm-hmm. And the whales he thought were amazing, but I think like he knows, not that they're not his to connect with, but he's like, that's kind of your thing.
He's like, I'm happy for you, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting.
Can you tell us about a couple of the recent secret pieces of magic you've set up for your son, namely the letter from Dumbledore and the summer fairy?
Yes. Yes. Well, one of those sacred things is the fairy book that I've continued.
Yeah.
And then yes, he has only read the first Harry Potter. He absorbs things very deeply, so we haven't moved on yet. They're kind of intense, but he like immediately took, who doesn't, to that world, and he started asking me questions, and I think, did he write the letter? I think he wrote a letter. He asked some questions, and I told him to write them down.
Yeah.
And so he ended up writing a letter to Dumbledore, asking questions about Hogwarts. And I thought, oh my gosh, if he could receive something in the mail that's clearly not my writing and like amazing. And I immediately thought of Grace as things just absolutely magical and look authentic and beautiful and creative. Yeah, so I sent Grace the questions, and you just like wrote, it was so incredible. All like this beautiful letter that looks ancient with a letterhead from Hogwarts, and then included a phoenix feather. That the letter was singed because Faust got jealous.
He got jealous of the crows that delivered the letter.
Oh yeah, it wasn't how much time Dumbledore was taking, it was the crows.
Yes. Yeah, it was the crows. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's why when it arrived at your house there were crow feathers too.
Yes. I think you told me about that. And then you packaged it separately, so I made sure it wasn't in like boring looking mail, and I put some crow feathers around, and it was at our kitchen stoop. So amazing. That was incredible. And they're like treasures that he keeps and he's pulled out and showed friends. And then the Summer Fairy. Summer Fairy is a cute little book we have here. And he was just at the age where he pulled out the book and he read about the Summer Fairy, and it's this being that it's a fairy that shows up. And the story is written, the family had this tradition, and then this girl, when she married into the family, she loved the tradition, so she wrote this book about it. And it was always that the Summer Fairy came, you leave her a flower on the last day of school, and she leaves like, things you need for a really fun summer, like some fun games and sunblock and sunglasses and a little bit of candy. And then it's all about like the rules of safety. It's kind of a really good way to teach your kid about like always go out with a friend if you're going like exploring in nature and stuff like that. So yeah, we did that this year, and I'm very dedicated to it. So I was putting it in his room, and he started to wake up, and he has Eric built him a loft, and you can kind of crouch underneath it. He can stand, and he can't see under there in his bed. I had to wait there for about 20 or 30 minutes until he fell asleep. Ninja walk out. Floorboards are really creaky. But yeah, and write in totally different writing. And he said, oh, look at this pretty writing, Mama. This is clearly not you. He is questioning. He is questioning everything, as he should. And I've always said, when he asks about Santa, I've always said Santa is a spirit. And it's the spirit of all the magic that is Christmas and giving and generosity. And I was like, when you see Santas like at the mall or whatever, that's people holding the magic and the spirit of Santa. So I haven't specifically said we carry the magic and the spirit of Santa and we put the gifts out for you. But when he asks, he says, is Santa real? And I was like, magic and the spirit of Santa is absolutely real. So I think I
still believe today.
What?
Which I still believe today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, me too. And he's definitely what they call 7, the age of reasoning or the age of enlightenment.
Oh yeah.
So he thinks about it, and he also, I think what I'm really trying to teach is the value of believing in magic and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though he's starting to realize that maybe that isn't fully real, that it's more wonderful and good to believe in the magic too. I think I'm seeing that a little bit, that little
Yeah. So he's
awakening.
starting to notice more and more that not everyone feels the way that your family does, but that it's a richer, fuller life.
Yes.
To feel that way. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, this question I was very intrigued to hear your answer to.
Oh, yes.
Although your son is remarkably imaginative and spends so much time around magically minded fairy related people, he's also has typical little boy interests and hobbies as well. How do you balance out your desire to see him respect magic and you're letting him be exactly who he is, no matter what that may end up being?
Yeah.
It's a big old question.
It is a big old question. I have not been very brief about anything. I think that was the question I was thinking of when I was starting to say something earlier, is he has a lot of that, like what you call typical masculine,
Mm-hmm.
like energy, where when I imagined doing doing fairy stuff and things with my child before I had a child, I definitely imagined like quiet walks, like looking at everything, little delicate things, collecting things, making little fairy houses. He has a lot more energy than that.
Yeah.
And he is like explosive, and he definitely loves pirates and guns and shooting things and attacking and wrestling. That is a huge
Sid's
part.
perfect for him then.
The what?
Sid is perfect for him then.
Right.
The pirate.
Yes. Yeah, he's actually, right now, he's building an entire pirate village out of Legos. And that is absolutely magical.
Yeah.
It's full of wonder. It's just that, yeah, I had to shift. I had to definitely shift my engagement with him around magic. And then at the same time, I think it's really easy. It's the same thing as with Eric, that I have to remember not to do everything in secret. And even if he's not doing it with me, show him my magical life and my practices and what I do. And so that he can see it happening. And then if he wants to engage, he can. So like coming up and seeing me pulling some cards, not being like, hey, let's pull some cards, but if he comes in and he sees me doing that, or if I do it downstairs around him, he might want to engage with that, and like he'll be like, well, I want to pull a card, what's the question? And of course, fun. Everything needs to be fun, with fostering that. But then it's an interesting engagement with the shooting, especially with what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. I talk about everything and the racism and the police incidences and trying to make everything age appropriate, but being really honest. And so I talk about it. I'm like, yeah, you have a lot of energy, and also we always have all these thoughts in our head that are really dark. We have to explore that stuff. Side tangent, and I've talked to him about it. I read this article by Stephen King actually in college about how our subconscious has these dark corners and we need to feed the alligators in our head. Mm-hmm. And that's why horror movies are desired. Mm-hmm. You can go, I hate horror movies. I've never watched Nightmare Before or Nightmare on Elm Street or any of those. I can't. I get nightmares. But so I'm grateful I read that, because I talk about it. I'm like, yeah, you might need to explore those feelings and get that rage out. I was like, but it's also really important to know that guns are a real thing and they're really dangerous. And they've done a lot. There's been a lot of really bad things done with guns in this world. And so we want to know about that, and also have fun in the make-believe, but really remember it's make-believe. And so it's interesting because I talk about magic being real What a horrific thing. That's make-believe. That's an interesting balance. But he did all those things kind of just, they settle in a bit. And he was talking recently, he was like, yeah, it really helps me like get those things out. And then sometimes, you know, he'll like totally shoot at me and like say these dark things. He's like, but no, not really. He like, pushes my face. And then he's super empathetic about other things. And there's also a balance with his personality of he really, really, really does imagine everything like very deeply, and it becomes so like movies. We've had to be really careful with what movies he watches because he absorbs them and has nightmares, and then remembering that those real things, like, so he would see things in his room and I'm like, okay, maybe that being's there, maybe that's an image from, it's really hard to tell the difference when you have a being that's there to protect you. And then I said also there's beings that protect us that can look really scary. So we have to remember like our own power and that we can talk to them. And also you can tell all the beings to go away. You have that power. You are in a human body, and like trying to teach that. There's kind of the flip side of sometimes I'm like, did I open him up too much? Teaching him try to have those like that protection and those boundaries too. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that answered the question wonderfully. So we're going to wrap things up, but I'm going to end with, do you have any other pieces of advice or thoughts or ideas for other parents who want to foster a love of magic in their children and also encourage them to be exactly who the universe calls them to be? Any final thoughts or anything?
Yes. I think reiterating, being yourself, not hiding who you are around your kid, which is really interesting as a mom. You start like trying to bend, like shape yourself for your kids sometimes. So doing your practices around them and not hiding it. Little daily things. Like I started when he was 2 or 3, we'd bring a crystal into the bath. And I'd say, why don't you, I was like, hold the crystal and anything you want to let go of from the day, put it into the crystal. And I was like, and then put it into the water and let it like go down the drain. So like little things like that. And then questions, like if they bring up something they see, ask them questions about it. Don't try to reason it at all. Just with like what they see in their room, even if it's like scary at night, it's the empowering while like also opening their imagination and asking them questions and letting them have space. And then seeing that like making Legos, doing all these things is also like all their imagination is magic. That's how we experience magic and wonder, is with our imagination. So any way to foster that. Yeah.
Yay, thank you so much. Yeah. It was wonderful. And I learned some new things about you too.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. All right, so I hope everybody enjoyed listening to and saying hello to Bryonie. I appreciate your having this conversation with me. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you wanting to ask me.